Okay, hello and welcome back to my stream. We are continuing with Gilded Shadows. And we have begun our first romance. We are romancing Reuben here. I don't know if these will change when you romance them or not. That would be an interesting twist. So, I got curious. And I did the other option when it comes to trying to get past that guy who's demonstrating, and one of them was just to join the group. And so you run into Jack at that point. So I just thought that was interesting, and you can see in the flow chart that I have now done all of those options. Obviously, I've only done them once because I haven't unlocked these other options. I mean, I still could have done them again, and I could have done them multiple times and just picked the same option each time, but, you know, whatever. But as you can see, it's still pretty much the same thing. It branches a little here, but for the most part, it's the same result. You still just go home and lie awake. So I thought it would be fun to actually go back to when you make your choice. You know, the part where you end up, you don't fully make your choice as to who you're going to romance, but you do lock out some romances over others. Now, obviously, I picked this option originally so that I could start the romance with Reuben. But if you click on this one, you're told, okay, this will unlock the Crimson character routes. I'm pretty sure I showed this before. And if you pick this one, this will unlock the endgame character routes. And then this one starts you on the Lance's route. And it spoils some stuff for some of the other romance options. So I think Lance was the guy at the bottom. He's like black with the white hair. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually pick these two so that we can see at least a version of the Crimson and blanking endgame routes, because we kind of skipped this by picking Reuben. If I didn't warn Jack, endgame would find us. I'd be recruited and he would probably be captured, I guess. If I went with him, it felt like there might be some glimmer of hope that I could somehow return home. Someday, anyway. It wasn't a huge glimmer, but it was there. At the very least, I might be able to start a new life in Delphi, one that didn't involve recruitment into a paramilitary organization as a high-ranked Esper. Leaving my fallen chair where it was, I headed towards the place Jack had vanished to. My heart was in my throat and my entire body was shaking. I was desperately trying to ignore the feeling that this was a terrible decision. I couldn't second-guess myself. In the end, I didn't know what lay ahead of me on either path. But this one felt right. Jack came out of the restroom right as I was about to brace myself and head in. Nearly running into me, he caught me by the shoulder, startled to see me right there. We have to leave. Now. Why? Caleb and Ari are coming here. I don't know when they'll arrive. How do you know? I don't know. I saw it. I feel it. I understand. He gave the cafe a careful look around and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We'll have to be careful. They haven't located you yet, or they'd already be here, but we don't know how much time we have. That's it? You're not questioning it? He gave me a wry grin as he led me carefully to a nearby exit at the back of the building. Nope, for an untrained Esper like you, a premonition like that means you're probably getting a peek at the most likely future trajectory, not some random low-chance possibility. I reckon we have a limited window for shifting onto a different future path. No time for questioning it. Their top bishops are pretty adept, but they might be having difficulty reading your movements for now. That's right. I forgot to grab my notebook. Okay. So, as a reminder, bishops are kinetics, telekinesis, precog, and clairvoyance. So, which is what she did. Frack. Glossary. I'm just double checking what I wrote down, because that's not, there we go. Theokinetics, okay. Any mind or slight-based sight ability. This includes precognition, the ability to see the future, postcognition, the ability to see into past events. Oh, so like the Echo in FF14. Psychometry, clairvoyance, and all similar abilities. So psychometry, actually, we kind of see that in the TV series Ghost Whisperer. You can see stuff, which is also actually kind of like the Echo in FF14. Bishops tend to specialize in theokinetic skills, most notably precognition. Theokinetic abilities are some of the most mentally taxing abilities and can often result in dangerous mind bursts and psi fatigue. But beyond that, there are other mental traumas associated with seeing future and past events. Many theokinetic specialists are under extreme mental burden with the things they see and trying to pick out a correct path among the information. Emotional strain is significant, and it's not uncommon for these specialists at endgame to retire early or move into other divisions to preserve their own mental health. Okay. Theokinetics, okay. That's interesting. One of them definitely has better skills with reading the futures of people she knows, so that's to our advantage. I only had a vague idea of what he was talking about, so I said nothing as he pulled a weapon from a holster at his lower back, one I hadn't even realized he had. With one arm in front of me, he pushed the door open before pulling me outside into the alley. He ushered me along to where I assumed his vehicle was. Everything was all turned around in my head, so I had no idea where we actually were at this point. So, I'm pretty sure there's a type of thing with imagination and memory where some people can think in images and other people can't. They think in text and words. And I'm one of the latter. So, I need a map if I'm gonna go anywhere. So I get lost very easily unless I know somewhere really well. I just followed him, trying not to stumble on anything. Okay, the music is getting a little loud. Settings, yes. Let's turn this down just a bit because I feel like I have to talk over the music. Why do you carry a gun? Aren't you some kind of Esper? Rooks use biokinesis to enhance their physical capabilities. It's not great for dealing with enemies at a distance. So he's basically saying he's a rook. Yeah. At the corner of the building, Jack paused again, carefully looked around the corner to check for anyone lurking out there, I guess. He held a small device up to his lips, whispering into it, "Unlock. Dahlia, the car's not far away. We're going to run. You up for it? Let's go." He grabbed my arm and pulled as he broke into a run towards the car. Stumbled after him, just trying to keep up. I heard the slow whine of a weapon a split second before it discharged. It hit the ground less than half a meter from my feet. So I figured out that a meter is about a yard, give or take. It's not exact, but a yardstick and a meter stick are pretty much the same length. So half a meter, if you think in freedom units or non-metric units, would be 1.5 feet, basically. And then we were at the car. Jack was throwing the door open and shoving me inside. There were more shots. Jack let out a grunt and staggered forward into the car, slamming the door shut. Yeah, because basically, if you look at a ruler that's a foot long, that's 30 inches. So 3 feet would be, not 30 inches, 30 centimeters. So 3 feet would be basically 90 centimeters. So that's almost a meter. Something hit the side, shaking the entire vehicle. But it didn't stop Jack from starting it and slamming his foot on the accelerator. "Hold on!" "To what?" The entire car shook as Jack sped over a curb and veered into the narrow alley we'd just come from. "Who was that?" "Hell if I know. Not Endgame. They'd never try to snipe us like that." "How are these people finding us?" "We're all psychics, Dahlia. Some bishops have a pretty wide range. At this point, we're just like an army of people having descended on this place." I figured the lack of pursuit before meant you were emitting a reverse cage. Queen ranks are known to do that, sort of an involuntary defense mechanism. Cage is a side technique that involves an Esper focusing in on a specific location within their sphere in order to block out the superfluous input and target a single area with condensed psi energy. Cages are used for a variety of purposes, such as their teleportation to pick a target location. So that's kind of what you do when you go to Reuben. There are many different interpretations of how cages and spheres work, as well as when and how they are used. Generally, it is viewed and taught as if it's similar to placing a magnifying glass over a specific area within a user's sphere, though this may not be the correct interpretation. Reverse cage is when an Esper encloses themselves or a specific area in a cage to block out all other psychic input, or else it blocks other Espers from being able to perceive them. Where a cage acts as a sort of hyper-focus on a specific spot, a reverse cage is like the opposite. It behaves almost like a shield to keep all psionic energy out. Weak reverse cages can be mimicked by some technology and are utilized by the Nomos to protect important areas in the wastes. We are not going to go down that rabbit hole of research. I just wanted to understand fully what he meant by reverse cage. He made another wild turn, and I was just glad there wasn't much room to be thrown around in the back seat. "I don't know what that means." "It means you're invisible to them, essentially, at least some of them. Even if a precog is looking into your future, a strong enough reverse cage would still block you out of their sight." "Then how'd that sniper find us?" "Could have tracked me instead of you. Endgame doesn't know you're with me, so they wouldn't be tracking my movements. Not true if whoever was stalking you back in that abandoned sector." "Great. I have a feeling they'll keep pursuing us until we've reached the rabbit hole, but I have friends there who'll help us out." "Rabbit hole? I don't think I've actually done this, because this doesn't sound familiar. I know I've taken the endgame route, just staying put until Ari finds me. It's a unauthorized entry point from Delphine into Cerna, or the other way around. Cerna, as you may know, has a few small unused domes just off their main dome complex, mostly sealed off from public access. Let me guess, you have friends who can get us in. Yeah, and there's a particular tunnel that's a straight shot to Pythia under the Ouroboros Sea. And Endgame just lets you go back and forth? Endgame doesn't know about every single thing happening on this planet, Butterfly. They're still mere mortals like the rest of us. And if you do run into him instead of Ari or Caleb, because that's the other option, he calls you that too. He calls you Butterfly from the start. So that's just his nickname for you. As long as we get there soon, I think we'll be fine. I'd rather take a nap right here. I deserve it. My head was pounding again. My ears are hot. Is that normal for side fatigue? I think you're going to be fine. And I'd like to reassure you by insisting the recipe is just as hot, but it's probably not the time. Flirting while they're being chased. Of course. Definitely not. I was silent a minute. Is it going to be like this forever, people coming after me? I doubt it. Once you're affiliated with someone else, people are less likely to pick a fight with an entire group just to get the new queen on their side. Right now, you're just an easy target. That's not comforting. Sorry about that. We were silent a while as Jack veered in and out of tight alleyways, but it wasn't long before we hit a long, open highway. He floored it, and I just shut my eyes and tried to not think about how fast we were going. Hey, Dahlia, why did you tell me about Caleb and Ari? Why were you so shocked? Weren't you trying to convince me to go with you? Well, yeah, I just kind of thought it was going to take a little more convincing. I guess I thought I had the best chance of finding some semblance of normalcy again if I was with you. It's obvious that everything has taken a turn and I won't be able to go back to how things were. But when it comes to finding a way forward that at least somewhat aligns with what I've always wanted, I guess I thought I had the best chance if I took this path. I mean, she has basically spent all her life trying to not get recruited into Endgame. And that's what's going to happen she doesn't know if that's what's going to happen with Ari and Caleb or with Jack, but she had to pick. And of course then there was the option of Reuben, so. There is, I think one of my hairs is stuck on my tablet. Hang on, it's distracting me. There, gone. Jack just laughed softly. That's a logical approach, I guess. People always choose the path that seems easiest, that's all. I don't want to join Endgame. I've never wanted that. I guess that makes sense. How long until we reach this rabbit hole? Not long, just brace yourself. It may get a little rocky from here on out. Well, that's basically how this day has gone, so I guess I'm ready for it. Glad to hear it. I continued down the long freeway, and I just hoped beyond hope I'd made the right choice. Crimson Interlude. So I'm doing this more for my benefit than anything else. Oh, that's all the, okay, we'll just stick that here for now. The ride was long, especially for someone exhausted and hurting all over. The headache settled happily at the base of my skull, a throbbing pain that spread around the sides of my head and down into my neck. But despite the pain, what Jack had said about the reverse cage thing made me afraid to sleep. If I was somehow doing something to hide our presence, would sleeping disrupt it? I had no idea, so I held in the back seat, watching the scenery blur past us, and tried to stay awake for as long as I could. After a while, everything dimmed to a haze. I didn't even know how long Jack drove. Hours, days if we were heading to the night side. There were miles of tunnels that wormed under the wastes and the sea. Regardless of whether we were in an illicit one, the distance was the same. I drifted off eventually. Jack certainly had to put the car on auto and sleep for a while. He had stopped several times. There were dim recollections of waypoints, Jack helping me in and out of his car. At some point, I was certain there were other people around. I didn't know who. My mind was so clouded, I was barely aware of what was going on. At one point, I woke up in a panic, my mind clear enough to realize I wasn't at home. Seconds later, I remembered it all. For a long time, I sat there with my heart painfully hammering in my chest, head still throbbing. Jack didn't seem to notice me, and I slumped down in the seat again. The tunnel seemed endless. We sped along, and the monotonous hum of the car eventually lulled me back to sleep, or at least somewhat asleep. At least whatever else was true, I was still safe. When I woke up again, the fog in my head had returned. The throbbing was ever present. A sour taste had settled unpleasantly in my mouth, keeping company with the nausea swirling in my stomach. Jack's vehicle had come to a stop. I struggled to sit up with the soft sound of rain in my ears. Beyond the windows was a dark and unfamiliar place. You can hear the rain. Okay, it's up to full. Okay, so that's actually part of the music. Interesting. Okay. We made it. We'd really made it all the way to Delphine. There's a relief, but also a strange hopelessness. With things as they were, could I even go back now? Ever? I rubbed at my face, trying to work out what was going on outside. With the door open only a crack, the voices were muffled and the bodies reduced to dim shapes. I peered out to find Jack and 3 other men. 2 were in suits, and the other seemed familiar, but I couldn't place where I recognized him from. Based on how the 4 of them interacted, I got the feeling it was this guy that was in charge, not Jack. Unsure what was happening, I stumbled out of the car. Not a very graceful attempt. But I wasn't feeling particularly graceful at the moment either. I just didn't want to stay in the car where I couldn't hear them. The shorter man with dark hair looked my way. His blue eyes were cold and unimpressed as he regarded me. Granted, I was in a sorry state, but still. Rude. Jack shifted, positioning himself between us. Casa? I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. What's going on here? Where are we right now? Just hang on a second. Think you can wait over there quietly for a moment, Butterfly? We were just working out some details on where to go next. Actually, I think I have done this. But after I finished the demo, I just kind of ignored it for a while. I mean, I kept track of the updates, but I didn't actually keep playing it over and over again. I don't appreciate being told to stand over here and be quiet. I did my best to straighten and glare at him, despite how horrible I felt. You have no right to talk to me that way. Frankly, they were all a little blurry, and I wasn't sure I was even glaring at the right person. But I was aiming my scalp, the blue smudge I suspected was Jack's head. That's not what I meant, Butterfly. I just thought, I have been to hell and back in a day. I don't have to bloody well be quiet. Dahlia, if you don't calm down, we're going to get a repeat of that incident with the car earlier. And you will fall over if you use any more psi today, intentionally or not. Well, that's enough. I think you've updated me on everything as it is, Jack. Drawing this out further is pointless. As you can see, she's had a rough time. I was hoping to meet up with you before we got back here, but we didn't have much time for a rendezvous. Nor did we. After a brief silence, Kesa turned to one of the 2 seats. There's a blanket in the trunk. Please retrieve it for Miss Blumenthal. The man nodded and obeyed. I watched him warily as he went first to the car, then approached me, but all he did was hand me the blanket as he was told. Oh, you can kind of see distortion like it's supposed to be, like it is raining. Not a word from him, not a smile. I hesitated, then took the blanket from him and wrapped myself into it. Understanding the situation in full now, I still believe we should take her to the mansion. I hear you on that one, Kai, but I'd rather have her go with me to Cordis. She clearly needs medical attention. She can get that there, and the court has the entire place locked behind a reverse cage. No one will find her. We could set one of those up at the mansion easily, but I won't have the court stormed by anyone trying to find her, including my father. His father? Even he's not that daring, Kesa. I wasn't sure if I should speak up. I didn't know that I understood enough about the situation to make any kind of decision. At the same time, Jack I knew, sort of. The court I'd heard of. This mansion was an unknown. But going to the court meant hiding out and trying to remain unseen. A mansion felt like I'd be, I don't know, more connected to things, maybe even in a position to call for help. But I couldn't say that for sure. What should I do? Okay, that blocks Jack, that picks Jack's route. And that picks Case's route. I know Jack. I want to go with Jack. They both stopped and looked my way. I lowered my eyes, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. I don't know what your plans were, either of you, but my plan was to go to the court with Jack. And that's what I want to do. That's the only thing from today that feels like it wasn't a lie. Kesa frowned. I could see his jaw working as he studied me. He finally let out a soft sigh. I'll have to come up with something to tell my father. You can tell him she needs time to recover and that we felt it was best to keep her in a secure place where she could lie low for a while. We don't want to risk this situation blowing up bigger than it already is, so if we can keep Endgame from knowing her exact whereabouts for a while, that'll be best. I'm not sure that will placate him, but I will do my best. He looked my way again, his eyes sternly cold. You've put us through quite a lot of trouble, Miss Blumenthal. I hope you recover well so it's worth it. I intend to recover, but not because I care about the trouble you went to. I didn't ask for your involvement. He gave me a frigid smile. No, but there's a good chance you'd be much worse off without it. Case only nodded curtly to the two suits and returned to his car. Jack moved to my side, and I sagged against him, closing my eyes. Let's get you back into the car. Who were those people? I'll explain when we get where we're going. You're still in pretty bad shape. You rested on the drive here, but at best it kept the side fatigue from getting worse. It didn't do much for helping you recover. I looked back as the others drove off. I hope we get there quickly, because it seems like there are a lot of things you haven't told me. Butterfly, there's no way I could tell you all the details about the situation in the limited time we've had. You'll hear the rest of it soon enough. You had a point, I suppose, so I settled back into my seat with a groan, wanting this stupid trip to be over. I wanted a bed. Sleep. But as the door shut and we drove off, I couldn't help but wonder where exactly I was going to end up. And what I'd learn when we got there. And there's Jack's route. Okay. So, I was also going to go into the endgame route, so that we could see the endgame interlude. But I think, yeah, so Crimson Interlude, you basically pick between Jack and Kesa. And Endgame Interlude, you pick between, I think, Ari, Caleb, Magnus, and I think it's just those three. But anyway, I just wanted to experiment a little bit. So let's go back to Reuben's route. Begin at the beginning. 2 days later, I was still lying low at Reuben's place. Oh, her hairstyle is different now. My brain damage was recovering from the neuron therapy treatments I'd been prescribed, so that was a relief. Everything else, though, let's just say brain damage might be the least of my worries. So basically, you're in government protection now, to keep any organizations from trying to get a hold of you. There's like a temporary version, which you've already got, and then you can apply for a more permanent version. And also your story has been leaked to the press, and it's basically showing Endgame in a bad light. Which she's like, oh, they never hurt people, and Reuben's like, are you sure? The media frenzy over my story had died down some over the last couple of days, which was a relief, but the story wasn't even close to forgotten. Reuben was taking excellent care of me, though. He'd been on leave so he could stay home with me, and while he sometimes fielded work calls, he hadn't left me alone in the house even once. The TPPS had been poking him about my current living situation and his relation to me. He didn't come out and say it, but I got the feeling they may have been thinking of keeping me in his care for the time being and listing him as my official protective agent. And, he did inform your family of your situation and let them know that you're okay. He'd made an offhand remark that the Esper division was occasionally called in for it when the person being protected was an Esper. I didn't know how he'd feel about my staying in his care, and I was afraid to ask. So for now I was focusing on recovering. He was doing his best to help. He was thoughtful too, honestly the sort my mother would definitely call boyfriend material. In fact, she had called him that when I told her about him earlier in our conversation, the first we were having since my arrival in Cerna. Dahlia? My attention was pulled back to said conversation when Mom called my name. I'm here. Sorry, Mom. Still a little tired. What were you saying? I was asking if you're dealing with the media lurking out in front of this place where you're staying. No one knows my exact location, so they wouldn't know where to camp. Is it really bad at your place? It's not as much anymore. Most of them left after we repeatedly told them that we hadn't heard from you. And the ones who stayed have lost interest the more we refuse to speak to them. That's smart. Just say, no comment, no comment, no comment. One caught Brian as he was on his way home yesterday, but Endgame is still guarding us, so they came to his rescue. That was upsetting. I never even considered the possibility my being an Esper would affect my family and their safety. The thought of someone using them to get to me, or just harassing them in my name, I hadn't thought they'd need guarding at all. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know it must be so frustrating for everyone. Dahlia, sweetie, you have nothing to apologize for. We're just glad you're safe. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have realized what was going on with you all this time. How were you supposed to realize that? Right? I'm your mother. I should have known. If I had, I could have helped. Mom, it's enough that one family member being blatantly ignored Esper regulations. I don't think we need the entire family to be in on it. Why not? Things like this should be done as a family. Oh. I'm dubious about that. Some things shouldn't be a family affair, and breaking the law is one of them. Tell that to Crimson and Noir. They're literal crime families. Are you suggesting I should have turned our family into a crime family to hide that I'm an Esper? Everyone has to start from somewhere. Oh my gosh, I kind of like her mom now. She was a little annoying in that first bit with her when she's bugging you about grades and stuff. Mother! It was so nice to talk to her again. But a little timer chimed inside my head and I sighed. Of course. Mom, unfortunately it looks like our time is up. Sorry. But like I mentioned before, I'm not technically allowed to access this network. Reuben's going out on a limb by allowing it, and he only did it because he knows it's secure. But the longer we talk, the more likely someone will notice. Honestly, one day you're a normal student, and the next you're having to use secret channels to communicate with your family in case some mob boss on the other side of the planet is listening in. Well, you know me, always getting into trouble. You've never been in trouble in your life. Guess that's why you went all out for your first attempt. A smile washed over my face, but vanished as fast. Dahlia, please keep us informed as much as you can. I know it'll be hard, but the moment you don't have to sneak onto secure channels, please call. I will, I promise. And be safe. I'll do my best on that one, trust me. And tell Detective Kellner how grateful we are to him. Yes, I will relay that too. And don't do anything irresponsible while staying alone with an attractive young detective who is very single. I looked up his profile, you know. He's quite handsome. Right, by irresponsible do you mean something like nearly getting myself arrested by Endgame, then evading arrest and being attacked by the mysterious people in the rain? Then teleporting myself into someone's lap in a panic? Yeah, no, I'm definitely talking about sleeping with him before being treated to dinner. Dinner is an awfully low threshold for sleeping with a stranger being a responsible decision, Mom. She was such a brat sometimes. I'd pity Dad if not for how often she dragged him in and made him side with her. I love you, Dahlia. We all do. I love you, all of you too. I miss you. We know. I didn't want to disconnect. I wanted to talk to her for so much longer and just listen to her voice and reassure myself it was going to be okay. But we disconnected a few seconds later and I drew my knees up to my chest, letting out another frustrated sigh. That was such a just a nice family interaction. I love it. I was glad they were all okay. Glad they had been understanding. And I wish more than anything I could be with them and talk with Mom more. I always relied on her so much through things like this, and now they felt so far away, my ability to talk to her was limited, at least for now. It was just that with all the interest in my story, it would be best to be wary of how I spoke about it, since we didn't know who could be listening in. And I couldn't deny it would be irritating to say something offhand to Mom on a call, only to have Endgame leap out of the shadows with an accusatory, "Aha!" Anyway, I didn't want to think about all that this early in the morning. Not that it's all that early. Reuben was moving around in the kitchen, so I dragged myself off the bed to finish getting dressed so I could join him. I was still thinking over the call with Mom when I stepped around the corner into the kitchen a short while later, to be confronted with Reuben making breakfast, with the shirt slung over his shoulder instead of on his body. Whoa! Nice! Of course he's, yeah. Nice muscles. Mm-hmm. Oh God. Mom's comment about the very attractive detective popped up and smacked me right in the face. I could almost hear the phrase irresponsible decisions echoing in my brain. Okay, sorry about that. My face went hot. Mom. I hastily turned away, refusing to stare at him despite an intense urge to be irresponsible in that very moment. someone being shirtless was not grounds for being gawked at. And I wanted to get control of my facial expression before he noticed me. Look at her blush! Look at her blush! She's blushing! This is definitely Mom's fault. Why did you have to say that? Took a deep breath and turned around, smiling as I fixed my eyes at a point beyond him and absolutely did not stare. Good morning. Oh, Dahlia. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. He looked around frantically before remembering the shirt was over his shoulder. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Of course they're all attracted. That's the whole point. He grabbed it and turned away. I stared hard at the top of the bar until he was finished. Sorry, I thought you were still talking to your mother. I'd gone to get dressed, but the eggs needed me, so I had to rush back out. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay. Oh, don't worry about that at all. I don't mind seeing... I mean, not that I was looking. Oh, I almost forgot to write down which choice I picked. So there's basically two versions of Reuben's route. There's the passion ending and the sweet ending. And the sweet ending, some of your options are basically it keeps you under a certain threshold, but above another one, so that you do actually get a good ending with him. And the passion ending is basically you rack up the approval with him, I guess you could say. Not that it's not worth looking. No, you know what? I'm just going to stop right there. Don't worry about it. I pressed the head to my forehead and mentally kicking myself for whatever the hell that had been. Reuben was watching me with a look torn between amusement and embarrassment, which, yeah, that was fair. I had no idea how I'd botched that. Still Mom's fault. You okay? Yes, I am. And what I meant to say is that I have 4 brothers, so I'm used to seeing all states of undress. I was not shocked. And I'm going to stop talking now. So, she's already mentioned one brother before. This is the first time we've heard how many brothers she has. I only have 1, and 1 is enough, to be honest. I love him dearly, but he drives me crazy sometimes. I can't imagine 3 more, whether like him or not. 1 brother and 2 sisters is enough. He's still looking at me like, I don't know, like he might be worried the brain damage was worse than we thought. I was holding back the strangled groan. It had been a while, and Mom's remark about him being attractive enough to warrant irresponsible decisions was the primary culprit. As if you hadn't been thinking about it yourself. But yikes. Okay, well, I'm glad it didn't startle you too much, but I'll try to be more careful. Wow, Dahlia, way to make things incredibly awkward. No, wait, I'm blaming Mom for this. So there's part of her that accepts it really is her. Despite how much I was still berating myself for that bizarre display, I forced as relaxed a smile as I could manage. Well, you couldn't help it, right? The eggs needed you. They did. But even so, I should remember that I have a house guest right now. It's still your house. You're allowed to be comfortable. Well, maybe, but still. Ugh, so awkward. Wanting to look at anything else but Reuben now that I'd made things weird, I turned from him and leaned my back against the bar. Because the news report on the screen across the room was definitely interesting and needed my absolute attention. Yup. Oh wait, it actually was something interesting. I watched in silence for a moment. You know, maybe I was being naive, but I expected to cycle out the news faster than this. They'll discuss it into the ground as long as it's generating views and traffic, and given Endgame's latest statement, I suppose they feel there's more to talk about. Their what? Endgame's statement is just more of the same tactic of pushing blame off to other groups. Well, confirming you came into contact with one of Crimson Skies and made a daring escape with your newfound Esper ability certainly bolsters their previous claims. I still can't believe Jack is a member of Crimson. He seemed nice? Yeah, well, I've been doing my own digging regarding Jack Visser now that Endgame is throwing him under the bus. He used to be a member of Endgame, you know. Not that it's information most people will be able to dig up as easily. He what? My contact said he defected to Crimson about 10 years ago. You know the name of the previous queen was Sylvia Visser, right? Relatives? I assume so. Personal information on agents is pretty limited, and my contact wouldn't say much more. But I guess that's neither here nor there. Endgame is using his current affiliations to stress the gravity of the situation you were in. And your family, of course. And the greater public. Of course, all to justify their actions. Yeah, well, I still can't believe there was no other way to handle this situation. I assume many people feel that way. But they're sticking to their claim that their concern for your family being targeted was why they wished to apprehend secretly. If no one knew who was responsible for your disappearance or who had acquired you, there wouldn't be a point in risking going after your family. Yeah, it's a pity they didn't explain any of that at the time. Not even a come with us if you want to live or something. The more I think about it, the more I have time to rehash it all, the angrier I get. What kind of absolute idiot decided it would be best to keep me in the dark? I suppose they'd say they didn't know who was listening or watching. If Crimson knew you were with Endgame, they might try to leverage your family against you. But that wouldn't work if you were with Noir or anyone else. And if you didn't know you were with Endgame, how would anyone else? Yeah, but Crimson clearly knew, and Endgame knows that. But the general public doesn't know how much Crimson knew about you, or anyone else. Ugh. And I was getting worked up again. An exaggerated sigh worked its way out as Reuben pushed a plate and a cup of coffee my way. It smelled amazing. Eggs, some sort of sausages, and what looked like potato pancakes as well. I leaned my elbows on the bar, pulling the mug closer so I could glare into it. Maybe I was being ungrateful for not appreciating Endgame's attempt to keep me safe. I still hated how they went about it. At least they're taking responsibility for the damage that little car chase caused, I guess. I'm sure the Cecilus Council is pleased to have them pay for it. Ha! Endgame can almost always spin something like that in their favor as long as no one was hurt. And that's all any of this is. Just endless spinning. Seems exhausting. I find it to be, but in the end, all big organizations are like this, no matter how noble their supposed cause. All of them? Really? Probably sounds cynical to say, but yeah, all of them, in my opinion. He joined me, flopping down on a bar stool with a plate of his own. Eventually, it seems like they all retreat to the shadows, hoard secrets, and start serving themselves more than the people they're meant to protect. Hell, even Utpal can be like that if you look at the organization as a whole. Individuals are different, but in the end, we're also beholden to the organizations we work for. So sometimes it's our duty to also guard those secrets and serve the organization over the cause. He was right. That did sound cynical, but I didn't get the sense he was a cynical person by nature, which just made it feel like he had a good reason for feeling that way. Endgame is supposed to be the good guy, you know. They do a lot of good, but that doesn't mean the organization is good. And what do we expect, really? They're shrouded in secrecy and have no accountability. Of course, that fosters bad behavior and overstepping. Oh, damn it. I tweet where, when I go online, and I guess I tweeted the wrong username today. Hang on. There we go, fix that. Okay. Continuing on. And what do we expect, really? They're shrouded in secrecy and have no accountability. Of course it fosters bad behavior and overstepping. Half the time, no one even knows they're overstepping, and the other half, they don't call it out because it's in the name of public safety, as if that makes it all better. Fortunately, I have enough connections that we could call it out this time. That's why I told you to prepare yourself for this to last a while. It's not every day that we get to have a conversation about endgame stepping on civilian rights. Sorry, I didn't mean to rant about it again. I don't mind hearing your rants. Remember, I actively avoided ever talking about any of this. The only person I ever discussed Esper things with was my ex. And it was just because he was studying them. The policies and all that I'm really ignorant of. It doesn't get discussed in New Albion as part of the regular political discourse, and I would have avoided it anyway. So hearing your opinions is interesting now that I can't exactly avoid it anymore. To be honest, now that I'm in the middle of it, I'm curious what you think about, well, about how you navigate protecting everyone's rights when people like me exist. It seems complicated. It's a complex knot, yes. If there was a simple answer to that, I think we'd have implemented it by now. But I guess one thing I'd like to see is more high-ranking Espers in normal departments like mine, so we don't have to rely on Endgame for everything. That reliance on them to solve these kinds of problems just solidifies the idea that we can't function without them. This idea that the general populace needs protection from Espers as a collective is flawed from the start. The idea we need a peacekeeping force to act as a shield, and a specific Esper is either the shield or the reason we need the shield, I don't agree with. I understand why people are wary of the danger Espers can cause, but I think the issue is more nuanced than our current laws can manage. Statistically speaking, did you know there should be at least 10 queen ranks somewhere in the solar system, and almost as many king ranks? So I don't think I mentioned this before, but king ranks, there you go. They have telekinesis that allows them to communicate with technology. So that is a very unique, and the only rank that can register with more power is the queen rank. So it does, in a way, it kind of relates to chess, with the king ranks having a very unique and powerful skill set, but it's limited, whereas queen ranks can do pretty much anything. And in chess, the king can only move one space in any direction at a time, whereas the queen can move as far as she wants in any direction. So there's that. Only a few are accounted for, so where are the rest of them? Living peacefully somewhere the way you were, maybe not even aware of their abilities. Especially the queen ranks, if they can mask what they truly are by just passing for a normal person. It's obvious regulating Esper stems more from fear of harm they could do than the idea we are running wild in the streets on a daily basis. Yes, but the preemptive curtailing of freedom is not the solution, nor is giving one organization license to do so at will. By will. Espers are no less deserving of protections than everyone else, and I feel our current laws are weighted in favor of the majority. So it feels a bit like the whole discussion in Dragon Age about mages and whether they should be preemptively locked away in the tower because a few of them could go rogue and screw things up for everybody else. But we see in Dragon Age 2 especially how well that goes, and how much of it depends on who's in charge of keeping the mages in the tower, in the circle. Because we see what happens with Meredith and her attempts to keep everyone safe. It just makes the situation worse. Specifically in ways that have allowed Endgame to take advantage of their broad wording and allowed others to ignore the problem. So it comes back to new legislation. It usually does. Poked at my food, wondering how many times I'd have the same conversation over the next few weeks. Food not to your liking? No, it looks delicious, as usual. It had only been a few days, but I kept finding myself surprised. He seemed to eat properly and be a decent cook despite the strong bachelor vibes. I had a thought. Sorry. I'm gonna double check something. Nothing to, I'm just, my brain. Okay. I don't know where my brain went today. Okay. I post on Blue Sky and Twitter, or if he's caught by the other name. And I said it was by the wrong studio. And I realized now. I got a tweet from the one studio, a response from the one studio on Twitter, and they were like, you meant this other studio. I'm like, oh, dang it. And then I double checked on Blue Sky, and I'm like, yep, named the wrong studio there too. I'm fine. It's just it's been fun the last couple days because it's been raining. Not that Bachelor couldn't be a good cook, but in a high-stress job like his, I had the soft mental image of him running out of the house with a cup of coffee in hand and half a bagel crammed in his mouth. Maybe cooking is his way of de-stressing. Of course, I had no idea what it was like when he didn't have a guest. Maybe he did run out of the house with half a bagel in his mouth in the mornings. I got much better fare than that. The eggs turned out great despite the egg emergency. You're a surprisingly good cook. You can thank my parents, though mostly my father. He always used to insist my sister and I help with dinner. He refused to let us leave home without knowing how to put a decent meal together. He's a good dad. I can cook, but I wouldn't say I'm good, more like adequate, and my mother is always getting on to me about eating better. Dad's a chef, so I suppose it was especially important to him, but adequate is all you need, really. After standard university student fare for a while, you might disagree. The day we met, I was going to get food because my kitchen was literally empty. And then those jerks made me lose my tangerines. I'm sure it's much harder when you're living on your own and trying to maintain healthy study habits, or stay at the top of your class like you did. Especially New Albion's system. New Albion's notorious system. I imagine it's brutal. It's hard for me to imagine. I was already out of school by the time I was your age. I love how you say that like you're so much older than me when you can't be much more than 40. 43, actually. Time measurement. I think... Let's go to the extra super quick. Profiles. So... yeah, 29 Earth years, so he's almost in his 30s if he were living on Earth. And 23 Earth years, so basically a 6-year difference. That's not much more than my parents. So old. He laughed at my gentle teasing, grinning at me over the edge of his coffee cup. Not old, no, but it's certainly older than you are. Barely. My oldest brother is older than you, I hope you realize. But I guess it feels different being well into your career rather than in school still. But there are people my age who will be studying long after I'm finished as well. Maybe I should have chosen a field that would have had me out of school and off our college faster. Because you'd have been gone by now, and Endgame would be less likely to find you or come after you. Well, that's true. I can't deny that's part of why I wanted to work off-world. Which probably sounds selfish to a public servant like you. I think it's an understandable feeling, one shared by a lot of people. It's relatively known that Esper sometimes go to Sierra to avoid recruitment into Endgame too. I'm sure they'd go to other places if it was less expensive to get there. No one likes having their future chosen for them. I didn't know if he believed that or was just saying it to make me feel better, but it worked, so I had to give him that. He could have been so much more judgmental about my decisions, but I always seemed willing to consider my side. I wrapped my hands around the still warm coffee, smiling a little. Thank you for always being so understanding, Reuben. I know why I accidentally said the other studio, because they were the ones who did Heart of the Woods, so I still kind of had them on the brain. Just don't know why. I just forgot. That isn't something you have to thank me for, Dahlia. I'm not going out of my way to try to understand your situation. And I don't think it's that great a thing to sympathize with where you're coming from. Everyone has their own story. I think it's easy to forget that, though. In Cecilis, there was always such pressure to conform. The people with their own stories were left behind. The rest of us did our best to fall in line and just contribute. It's not like that everywhere. And I just think that it would be difficult to deal with the prospect of your life being dominated by something outside your control. It's something I've never had to consider personally. I think that diminishes my ability to judge. It's not ideal that you chose to not register. Like it or not, that's the law for Esper children in New Albion. But from what you say, you didn't realize you were an Esper until you were older. And by that time, well, I can also understand the complicated feelings. As a pseudo-Esper, there was never a reason for me to worry about endgame, but I do remember the feeling I had when registering. It was strange to feel singled out. I imagine it's amplified when you're a full Esper. I didn't know you were a pseudo-Esper. It's not as great as it sounds, so there's not much reason to brag about it. It's sometimes a little useful, good instincts and all that. But that pit I get in my stomach when I know something is wrong or when I know someone is lying is incredibly hard to ignore. It's this kernel of worry that follows me and dogs my thoughts for days, for months, years sometimes. I suppose that's why I can consider the possibility that your anxiety about Endgame was something similar. Something you couldn't ignore. You think so? I never considered the possibility of some kind of precognitive ability being at the core of that anxiety. I mean, I couldn't rule it out, but I think that's a very generous assumption. The truth is, I just already had my own aspirations by then, and I was afraid of losing those dreams. Which is probably not a very good excuse. I think the line between an excuse and a reason is razor thin anyway, and in any case, what's done is done. Ruminating on it changes nothing. So let's talk about something else for a while. Like you, I feel like we've examined my history, situation, the timeline of my childhood, my life plans for days. Why don't you tell me more about yourself? I still don't know that much about you. Haha. Unfortunately, I can say with confidence that I'm the least interesting person in this house at the moment. Anyone who can calmly handle someone materializing out of the air and falling on them is sure to have an interesting backstory. Hardly, I just recognize teleportation when I see it. Okay, fair. So, you're boring, I understand. But also, I'm still curious. Why did you go into public service? I don't have an interesting reason for that either. I just wanted to help people, I suppose. I like solving problems, so it felt like a good fit for me. Not wanting to make the world a better place? No, I don't have any illusions about correcting injustice or anything like that. Most of the time, we're not called in until an injustice has occurred, and you can't just fix that. You can't undo a crime. But I suppose preventing as much injustice as possible or putting a stop to ongoing injustices isn't a bad mission either. That said, you burn out fast when you convince yourself you'll make a noticeable difference in the world. I'm hardly a jaded veteran, but I've seen that happen more than once. I tend to focus on the differences I can make for individuals and try to let that be enough. Sometimes that is enough. But that's a romantic view of the job, if I'm being honest. The reality is that it's a lot of long hours and feeling like you're stuck in one place without... Trailed off and let out a low laugh, as if there had been a joke in there I missed. He gave me an apologetic smile. I guess none of that is actually what you asked. That's the danger of asking me a question like that. I never said I didn't want to hear it. I'm sure it's not interesting to listen to me ramble about how dull and stressful my job is. Why not? Since most jobs are more boring than most people think. It's the same in my field, too. People hear archaeology and picture exploring old ruins and digging up bones or something. I mean, that's part of it when you're in the field, but there's a surprising amount of dull work that happens in a lab. Sorting through boxes, labeling things, piecing together broken artifacts, and there is so much report writing. So much. Same. I laughed as we let out simultaneous groans. My point is that I don't find it boring to listen to you. Well, thanks. I appreciate you indulging me. Besides, I've seen your home office. Not only is it a disaster, but there's also that huge board on the back wall, and that looks interesting. I didn't know you'd looked in there. You've left the door open a couple times. You need something to drink. It's interesting to see someone keep notes organically like that, pinning paper notes to a board instead of it all being digital. That's much more like my mental image of a detective. You even have the hat stand. That was a joke gift from my sister. I absolutely do not wear that hat. What a shame. And most of the notes in there aren't for work, but personal research. Personal research into what? It's not that interesting. I laid my hand on my chin and gave him an expectant smile. He responded with a low chuckle as he drained the rest of his coffee, then stood to get more. Why don't you let us be the judge of whether that's interesting or not? Remember how I said that sometimes it's difficult to ignore my gut feelings? Mm-hmm. He held up the coffee pot silently, asking if I wanted more, but I shook my head. He poured himself another cup. Well, in this line of work, you come across a lot of things that go unexplained or unsolved. Cases that go cold because you can't find the trail of evidence leading to a conclusion. You notice incongruities in stories and news. You hear odd rumors that lead nowhere. And those things just sit at the back of my mind, gnawing at me. So I developed the habit of researching those kinds of incongruities in my spare time. A pastime, in a way. I spend a lot of hours chasing down little clues or leads for different things. Setting it up on a board like that lets me connect things together in different ways or visualize it more clearly. That habit eventually led to chasing down leads on other types of stories and rumors, too. At this point, I guess you could say it's almost like a compulsion. Other types of stories and rumors? What types? Just, I don't know, actually. Here's an example. 3 months ago, one of the major Ouroboros tunnels between Cerna and Delphine was damaged. They had to shut it down for 2 weeks for repairs. Officially, there was an underwater volcanic eruption that caused a series of minor seismic events which damaged the tunnel. Seems normal enough, but when I saw the report, something didn't sit right, so I went digging. None of the National Geologic Services reported a volcanic eruption near there. It just so happens that I'm aware of a few non-public research facilities in the area. Out there in the ocean? Yes, submerged research facilities. Coincidentally, a few information sources I watched started reporting that one of Delphine's labs sustained massive damage from some kind of explosion. The entire lab had to be evacuated, and it just so happens that it's within the vicinity of the damaged tunnel. Interestingly, the earliest rumors about the lab were from before the public announcement about the tunnel damages. So what could a lab out there be working on that caused an explosion big enough to damage the transit tunnels? And who is connected with it that the public reports all blame non-existent volcanic activity? When you talk about secret government facilities in the ocean, it starts to sound like conspiracy theories. Sometimes, yeah, I won't deny it. Okay, right. Okay, some sort of compulsion. So this is something of a compulsion? Do you believe it all, or do you do it to quiet that inner voice a little? That depends on the topic, I guess, but in most cases, I suppose it's a bit of both. With unresolved criminal cases, there's often nothing to believe or not believe. I just spend the time chasing cold leads because I want to see the case solved. With the things you could conceivably label a conspiracy theory, I don't know. I don't trust organizations, and it's easy to spot questionable behavior if you look close enough. I would be the first to tell you there's a lot of nonsense out there, though. And even if you're not looking into the more outrageous rumors, you still have to sift through it. And by outrageous, I mean things like the belief that 90% of the human population on our colonists was replaced long ago, unless it was now neo-humans. Okay, we already looked at that. Oh wait, I didn't actually save that decision, did I? Hang on. don't fall on the floor, please, pencil. I still need you. Okay. People believe that? Oh yes, and there's a whole litany of telltale signs that help you recognize who's human and who isn't. Amazing. But things like that aren't the focal point of my research. They're not verifiable, they're outlandish. And the goal is to be able to target people with accusations, right? It's fueled by the fear of the other and all of that. That's not what I'm interested in. What's not a theory is that a hell of a lot of stuff goes on in the shadows of this planet, and sometimes it hurts people. Some of the most terrifying groups out there are involved, and yet some of our most respected organizations have their fingers in it too. Look at what happened to you. If anyone had captured you, it would have been the direct result of secret plans to do so. Perhaps not so much with Endgame, but with anyone else you'd have become an unsolved crime, a missing person whose fate might never be discovered. And it would have been the result of conspiracies to obtain a new clean ring, perpetuated by some of the most notorious factions on the planet, perhaps even one or two government groups. I mean, Noir is pretty notorious, for example, for doing human experimentation with regard to Espers. There are rumors and some indirect evidence of Delphine's government doing the same. And there are threads of faintly connecting them to a disappearance here or that strange disturbance up in some isolated dome. That's the kind of stuff that draws my attention, or that I end up with a compulsion to solve. The thought that these groups are going after individuals. Dozens of Espers go missing every year on this planet. How much of that's connected to people going after them, the way people went after you? I think about that. I just want answers. I want to fix it? To do what I can to stop it, yeah. I guess it's even more difficult to ignore when you've got that gut instinct about things, huh? You have no idea. You also strike me as the sort that struggles to relax, like your version of relaxing is to pore over obscure information while trying to connect unsolved cases to each other. You've not been here nearly long enough to know me that well. Well, consider it a theory of my own. Hopefully that explanation does make me seem a little less out there, though. Well, it's not like there aren't a lot of bizarre conspiracy theories in my area as well, so my mind did immediately go to a strange place. That's fair. I'm sure there's a lot more speculating in your field since we know so little about the history of this planet still. Basically, I have to admit I'm curious about your research now. I mean the specifics of some of the cases you've looked into, or are looking at. Well, maybe I can share some of it later. I don't know how interesting you'll find it if you delve in. It's not exactly the Losan ruins. I was much more interested in Senecan culture anyway. I let out a regretful laugh. I don't think I'll be studying the Losan or Senecan ruins anytime soon. I'm sorry everything has been thrown into chaos for you. None of that is your fault. If anything, you've offered me a continued sense of normalcy in it all. As much normalcy as is possible, anyway. Speaking of normalcy, I was thinking that maybe I could take you around the city tomorrow, get you out of this house, get your mind off things. Seems like you've recovered enough to manage as long as we don't overdo it. I've been feeling a little cooped up, so seeing more of this dome might be nice. Excellent, then we can plan on that. I know a few good spots I reckon you'd like. Places that aren't as crowded as other parts, though this subdome isn't exactly a megacity in the first place. Of course, he's already thinking ahead to things like crowd size. He always seemed to think of everything. I glanced at him, intending to ask something about this subdome, but his head was tipped oddly to the side, eyes gone far away. Then he smiled at me as he stood. I need to take this call, if that's all right. No problem, of course. We had both finished eating, so as he moved into the living room area, I stood and started to gather up our dishes. He caught my eye from near the hallway and motioned for me to leave it, but I ignored him and continued, smirking as I deliberately stacked our plates. He gave me an exasperated but amused look before he stepped into his study to finish the call. It was nice to be cared for so intently, but it made me feel a little guilty. Receiving care without giving anything back was somehow stressful? Maybe that was just the new Albionian in me. Reuben had helped me so much already that clearing the breakfast dishes was the very least I could do. Yeah, it feels weird to not help, especially if she's going to be staying with him for an undetermined length of time. A frown passed over my face as I carried everything around the bar and into the kitchen to rinse them. I couldn't say how long it would last, this little bubble I was hiding in. I would be fortunate if it was permanent, but I knew it couldn't be. In the moments Reuben chatted about other things, I could almost forget the sword hanging above my head, ready to fall with the slightest shake-up. But when I was alone, it became ever present in my thoughts, a specter that grew in size the longer I tried to ignore it. Despite that I was apparently some superpowered Esper who had spent years hiding in plain sight, I wasn't good enough to see even a few seconds into the future, much less days and weeks. It is better to not know, but I could use comfort right about now. I made quick work of cleaning up, then moved to the nearby window, basking in the warm sun filtering in. I could only take one day at a time right now, couldn't I? If this momentary pause could just last a little longer, though. A few more days. Maybe then I'd be ready to face whatever would come next. Eventually I'd have to face it, but not yet. Not yet. Chapter 3. Okay. I don't know if I have time to go through another chapter. I mean, we could go and see what the endgame interlude is like. Nah, I want more. Let's keep going. It's pretty similar to Cecily's, don't you think? She's wearing a different outfit. A little, but it feels quieter, I guess. Which makes sense. I wouldn't expect a subdome to feel as crowded as Cecily's. Right. I have to change a page in my notebook. Oops. This might be so. I can spell, I swear. Jeez. Thank goodness this is in pencil, not in pen. For the people who celebrate Happy Easter, by the way. You can't really compare, well, anything else to something as huge as Cecily's. I don't dislike it, though. I've lived in Cecily's all my life, but that doesn't mean I was in love with it. It was so crowded, and I shrugged and smiled up at him as we walked down the footpath. There's a pleasant atmosphere here. I like it. I enjoy it, too, whenever I'm here. I suppose you must travel quite a lot for work. That I do, mostly throughout the triad, but every so often I end up in random places. Hourly, Asteri. No, I'm not going to click on those. Asteri? That's pretty isolated, isn't it? It is, enough that I'm shocked you've even heard of it. Well, I know of it through my brother and father. They have an impressive self-contained dome matrix because of their enhanced life support system. She did mention that her father works in the horticultural part of domes. That was why Oliver was interested in it. I'm assuming that's her brother, and I think Brian was her father. I'm not sure which brother. Okay. So I'm getting the impression that she was basically the baby of the family. It's an interesting place. They have a few issues here and there because of their ties with Delphine, but I think they try to avoid calling us in due to the neo-human community. Neo-humans? That's a whole thing. But yes, there are quite a few small neo-human communities dotted around the complex. Unofficial, of course. Seems like there's a lot of unofficial stuff that goes on everywhere. Far more than you realize, probably. I shouldn't say much, considering I spent most of my life as an unofficial Esper. I've come to terms with my dark criminal past, don't worry. I wouldn't quite characterize it as a dark criminal past. Oh, not worried about tainting your reputation by colluding with the criminal? That has never been a concern. I'm glad to see you can finally smile about it a little. Well, it's not like it doesn't still frustrate me, but humor is a coping method, you know. Humor is sometimes the only thing that got me through exam season. I'm glad I missed out on those intense exams by not living in New Albion. Have you always lived in Cerna then? I grew up here. My parents still live here in Erida too, though I don't see them as much as I'd like. My parents used to sometimes talk about moving here to get away from the rigidity of New Albion. It's great living there sometimes because it's always at the forefront of everything and it has the best schools, the most opportunities, but I don't think we realize how exhausting it is until we get out. Anyway, the class never seemed to pan out, obviously. It's a shame. That might have been a good move for your family. Hard to deny Cerna is more relaxed. It's strange how different the cultures and systems are. I mean, Cerna and New Albion are both members of the Triad, but even so, everything about them is different. Their political systems, the way citizens are treated, policies regarding Espers. Even international relationships are on much better terms with Delphine, for example. Then again, I guess Cerna's always sort of been the odd one out when it comes to the Triad, huh? I imagine the differences date back quite a ways. Both nations existed long before the Triad did. There was plenty of time for them to develop different ways of doing things. And of course, New Albion's history can't be matched. They weathered the Civil War, so their history with Delphine dates way back too. So a lot of the differences might relate to Cerna's relatively younger age. New Albion had a good reason for some of its policies, historically speaking, but Cerna had the benefit of coming after and being able to streamline their approach. You'd think New Albion would have examined policies that have been in place for hundreds of years, but I suppose that isn't quite how it works. Nope. People only question things when there's a catalyst most of the time. Even in Earth history, there was a tendency for old laws not to change until they had to. Yep. That seems accurate. Across the street at a corner, and Reuben mentioned a little cafe where he wanted to stop for lunch. He was making good on his offer to show me around the city, and so far it was nice. So nice it created a disconnect between being on what, from a practical standpoint, was almost a bit of a date, and the way my life was sort of in shambles at the moment. Everything around me was continuing as normal, but things were the opposite of normal for me. I was one of the strongest known Espers in the world, supposedly. Some of the most powerful and scariest factions on the planet were after me, supposedly. And here I was, walking around like a tourist in Cerna, looking at the little shops for all the people passing by unaware. Or all the people passing by unaware. There we go. And Reuben beside me with his hands in his pockets, the light catching the gold flecks in his eyes as he smiled and told me the bakery we just passed had good croissants. How everything could feel both normal and like it was falling apart in slow motion was beyond me. My heart didn't care for this discrepancy, but I suppose it was always like that. There's no developments in the situation, so I'd be stuck in this limbo for a while, probably. We arrived at Reuben's cafe a little while later and sat outside. It reminded me so starkly of my favorite place in Cecilis that I had to remind myself we weren't there at that little cafe I visited before things went badly south for me. I was gonna say... You okay, Dahlia? I looked up from the menu and smiled at him, some of the tension leaving me when I was confronted by that worried look on his face. I'm fine. This place reminds me of a little spot I liked on Cecilis, that place we stopped for brunch. Yeah, I guess they are similar. I guess that got me thinking about everything else and the lack of developments. I expected Endgame to do something by now. They could be waiting for things to die down a little first before they try to assert some kind of claim over you. Assert some kind of claim. Ugh. As much as I hate having to accept they'll do that, what do you suppose their ultimate strategy will be, based on your prior experience with them, and given how quiet they're being at the moment? I don't know. This is new ground for all of us, so it's difficult to be sure. But if I had to hazard a guess, I would say they'll give up on the idea of insisting you're a danger to the people around you. There's no solid evidence to suggest that's true. Latching onto your failure to register probably won't get them anywhere significant. They'd have to prove that you knew you were an Esper and... I mean, technically I did know. Anyway, New Albion has jurisdiction there. Generally the result of a failure to register is a fine, not some kind of imprisonment at an endgame facility. I expect most likely they'll try to insist you need to comply with regulations and receive training on how to control your psi. As we said before, they have limited long-distance training for adults, but those are for low-level Espers, not someone of your rank. For you, I imagine they'd suggest that appropriate training can only be done at Core Solaris, which is where they want you anyway. And what are the chances that I could actually ever leave Core Solaris should Endgame get me there? Slim, I would assume. Officially, of course, your stay would be temporary, but I imagine they'd find a way to keep you there once they have you. They would say it's too dangerous for you to leave, your psi is unstable, or they'd find ways to delay your training and fabricate whatever reason they can. Of course, that's assuming they attempt to force the issue rather than convincing you to go there. Logically, you choosing to go would be the best thing for them. I'm not sure how easy that would be. They may not convince you that you are a danger to society, but convincing you it's impossible for you to live normally on the outside? I trust that you can, but I can imagine them trying to prove otherwise. And it's possible that they genuinely believe that. Even the agents who tried to apprehend me may have believed they were doing the right thing. I would hope they did, honestly. It would be unfortunate if they believed they were doing the wrong thing, but did it anyway. At this point, even I wondered if they were right. Did I even know what it meant to live normally? Had I ever been able to do that? Normal is overrated. Just saying. I didn't know anymore. Our server returned to take our orders, and for a while, Reuben shifted the topic away from my situation. I thought it was intentional, an attempt to get my mind off things. But the conversation hit a lull, and my mind went right back to Endgame and how we were waiting for them to make their move, despite Reuben's efforts to get me off that topic. Kinda hard to ignore that elephant in the room. Reuben, I was thinking. Held up a hand almost as soon as I spoke, tipping his head to the side as he stared off to my left. Hold on, Dahlia. There was a brief pause before he spoke again. Winter? No, we're out having lunch right now. What is it? Is it urgent? I don't think we can... I understand, but what am I supposed to do with... Bring her? I'm not sure that's... Did you ask Phil if... Of course. Bring me where? Reuben tapped his fingers on the table for a moment, then let out a sigh. One that instantly told me he'd given in to whatever it was Winter was asking him to do. Okay, I understand. Send the directions. We'll head over right away. Yes, we'll be there soon. He groaned and ran a hand through his hair as he waved a server over to request that the lunch we had ordered a little while ago be put in containers so we could take it with us. I watched them retreat, then gave Reuben a look. Is everything okay? Well, as okay as it ever is. Unfortunately, I'm getting called into work. Looks like everyone else is swamped and they don't have much choice since I'm not officially assigned to you. He shrugged helplessly. So I can infer from the call that I'm going with you to work? Like, take your stray Esper to work day? Way less fun than that, unfortunately. But I can't leave you alone right now, so I've agreed to take you to the scene with me, yes. We're going to a crime scene? Like an actual... Is that allowed? What kind of crime scene? It's a home invasion. No one was killed, but there was a victim of an attack. And yes, civilians enter crime scenes all the time, but usually as consultants or specialists. As long as you don't touch anything and you stay where I tell you, it'll be fine. It's not as if there's a crime in progress. There'll be other professionals there surveying things too. Wow, crime had not been on my to-do list for the day. Or maybe that's just what happened when you hung out with a detective. Wait, if Reuben and Winter were being called in, then it meant Espers were involved, right? Are you okay with this? We can try to work something else out of it. No, it's fine. I'll go and patiently stand where told to stand, and not touch anything or contaminate the crime scene. And do my best to avoid wreaking havoc and what have you. A faint but regretful smile came to his face. He stood up and offered me his hand, nodding to the server who was heading toward us with our food packed into neat little containers. Took our food and then, because we were in a hurry, hailed a cab back to where Reuben had left his car earlier. Reuben spent most of the drive on a call with Winter getting details of the scene and what had taken place. He could have had the conversation entirely in his head, but was speaking out loud for most of it. I didn't know if it was to break up the silence or because talking in his head required too much focus. Either way, it was impossible to not listen in. I learned that a neighbor of the victim had reported a disturbance and called the safety department. The first responders had arrived to the scene of an obvious violent crime, and the victim was a registered Esper. Low level, of course. They were currently in critical condition at a nearby hospital and unable to be questioned. They expected the suspect was as well, based on a witness report that they'd used telekinesis while fleeing the scene. Listening to Reuben solidified the seriousness of what had happened. My stomach churned at the thought of visiting the scene of a crime, but I doubted Reuben wanted me there either. It made me realize what an inconvenience my presence was, and I just hoped they figured out my situation soon. The moment we arrived at what, on any other day, would have been an unassuming apartment, Winter found us and began to catch Reuben up on the rest of what he'd learned so far. I stood a couple of meters away listening to them. There were so many more people there than I expected, both outside and in. I shifted a little closer to Reuben almost unconsciously as Winter spoke of the victim and the suspect. The fact that they didn't have a clear description of the person that fled. The fact that someone saw him bolt down a stairwell and force open a locked emergency door with what seemed to be telekinesis, and that they didn't know the relationship to the victim, if any. The door looked like it had been forced open, possibly with psi as well. When the talk turned back to the victim and their injuries, I tuned the two of them out. I didn't want to hear, and it felt like I shouldn't listen. Instead, I focused on the team with psi detectives pouring over the house to locate signs of residual psi waves. That's what I gathered from what they were saying to each other anyway. I'd already been aware that psi waves could linger in a location for a while. It was something Trent had talked about before. I'd never seen the process of looking for them, of course. From the fact they were paying close attention to the door, it seemed that a higher concentration of psi there suggested the suspect used psi to enter the flat. They were reconfirming that psi had indeed been used to force the door. It was the reason for the unusual damage, just as the first responders had thought. The professionalism impressed me as I watched them. Everyone was calm, quiet, and focused on work, which you'd expect, obviously. But I didn't know that I'd find it as easy to compartmentalize the evidence gathering from the human tragedy involved. It took a very special person, I thought, to do this sort of work. I suppose it was fortunate no one had been killed, but someone had still been badly injured. I was struggling to not be emotional, and I was just a bystander. Then again, I could somewhat understand how focusing on the method might help one place the emotional response in a different place in the process. Work now and deal with emotion later. It seemed difficult, though. Reuben and Winter finished their conversation, and when I glanced that way, Reuben and I locked eyes before he left Winter's side and came to me. You okay? I'm fine, just trying to stay out of everyone's way. I'm going to have to take a look around. The attack happened in the back bedroom, and I need to go see. Well, anyway, we'll be getting all the reports later regardless, but Winter and I still need to look around. Don't worry about me, Reuben. You need to do your job. I get it. I'll be fine. The others will keep an eye on you while I'm busy. I've implied you're here to observe, but I didn't give any details. If anyone asks, you can tell them you're not authorized to say. I'll do my best to be the least suspicious person here, so no one asks. Sorry about all. If you apologize again, I'm going to request some kind of tribute. I said I'm fine. Okay, sorry, He stopped and let out a chuckle when he realized he'd done it again. I gave him a knowing smile. I'll be back in a while. Just stay put. He and Winter disappeared toward the back of the flat, and my slight smile faded. His concern was charming in its own way. If it had been up to him, I would never have come here in the first place. I knew that, but I could handle just being here. The others, the other teams present, weren't paying any attention to me anyway. 2 people were taking images of everything and labeling things. Another team earlier had been doing some kind of bioscan, but they had moved towards the back of the flat as well. And there was the trio doing the side scans. They had moved from the door and were starting on this room, but apparently their device was finicky if I was basing it on their frustrated conversation. 2 others were near the front door having a quiet conversation. They were heading to where I was standing, so I relocated out of their way. In any case, I wasn't sure if my psi would disrupt their machine. Could it pick up inactive psi? Or at least I assumed my psi was inactive. I wasn't trying to use it anyway, but apparently I didn't have to try. Well, I'd have to do my best to stay away from them. I kept an eye on them and edged around the room as they moved around. Hopefully Reuben wouldn't be too... My thought cut off when a powerful wave of nausea hit me out of nowhere. I doubled over, vision going white, while as the hearing in both ears blanked out, replaced by a thin, high-pitched tone. Her eyes! Look at her eyes! And the room's changed! I thought I put a hand to the side of my head, but I couldn't see or feel anything except the jolt of my knees hitting the floor. The world went spinning away from me until the image of my surroundings bled back in, only everything was faded and muted, dark around the edges like looking at it from far away. The investigation teams were gone, and I felt like I was dangling nauseatingly from the ceiling, watching a scene unfold below me. Someone came through the front door, a blurry form whose details I couldn't fully make out. In my mind, I heard the soft beep of the access code. This was home. This person belonged here. I could tell that much. They dropped their things on the sofa and tossed the jacket aside, disappearing towards the back. Beyond my confusion was panic as I tried to claw my way down the walls and stop whatever this was. Why was I here? I shouldn't be here. It was the groan of metal that made me pause. The front door twisted, opened. Someone was there. It was not someone who should be here. The first figure came flying out of the back room as someone else entered. Foreign emotions invaded from the outside, overlapping my own. Anger, surprise. The first figure fled to the back bedroom. The other followed. They had something in their hands. I couldn't see what it was. I couldn't see the details, but I also couldn't look away. There were more shouts. A powerful sense of anger hit me. No, rage, then intense terror. There was a muted crash, a short-lived scream. Wave after wave of rage-fueled panic slammed into my mind. It became a low thrum at the back of my mind, latching onto my own panic and echoing it. The second figure burst out of the hallway seconds later. Dread was all over their face, and the rage had evaporated. For a moment, it was as if I was watching a movie and the frame froze. I got a perfect look at him. Then he blurred past me. My stomach tightened, twisted. Bile rose as I felt myself yanked almost painfully towards the back of the flat, towards the back bedroom, like being pulled by a thin, glowing thread. No, 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 no. There was only pain and fear there. I didn't want... No! Dahlia! I snapped back into focus, gagging against a queasy, sick feeling in my stomach. Frantically, I tried to fend off the hands gripping my shoulders before I realized it was Reuben. And then I was back. Dahlia? What happened? My vision blurred, eyes stinging with sudden, overwhelming emotion, and I curled into him, letting out something that was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. We were both crouching on the floor, and I made no move to get up. Back off, give her some space. Dahlia, can you hear me? I tried to speak, but my tongue was glued to the top of my mouth, throat taut and painful. That was... Reuben, I think I'm going to be sick. Here, Winter was able to find this for you. Reuben, who had disappeared after depositing me in the hall, offered me a bottle of water as he crouched in front of me. Thank you. Feeling better? A little, not as dizzy as I was. Reuben, sorry to interrupt again. They said they'd have a virtual sketch artist waiting at the office for you. Jax has complained that you didn't bring one with you if you were going to bring a psychometric consultant. He's also complained that Dahlia's I'm not interested in Jackson's complaints right now. I get that his team may have to put their sideways scans on hold, but... His jaw tightened and he shut his eyes, exhaling slowly. As you may recall, it wasn't my idea to bring Dahlia, so I'm not going to field the complaints. If you need an excuse to give them, just say we were called in at the last minute. They could take it up with whoever had that brilliant idea. Sure, I'll relay that. I'm sure Phil will be thrilled when he gets the call. Reuben shrugged. Winter shot me an unreadable look before he disappeared back inside. Reuben's annoyed expression went sympathetic when he rejoined me on the floor. So that's, pretty sure that was post-cognition in action. Sorry for this, for making everyone frustrated, and you don't have to apologize for anything, Dahlia. What I said to Winter was true. Neither of us wanted you here, and it was short-sighted as hell for none of us to consider you might be sensitive to any psychometric echoes at a damn crime scene. If anyone should be complaining, it's you. I don't think anyone is to blame. You really okay? You looked like you were going to black out. I nearly did, but I really am okay now. That was just a bizarre experience, and things were spinning and distorted. There were feelings that weren't mine. It was nauseating remembering the sensation, though I wasn't panicked anymore now that I knew what had happened. Listening to my incoherent babbling earlier, Reuben had put together that I had a psychometric experience, post-cognition. That's what I said. Yeah, we see that happen in the TV series Ghost Whisperer. That's how Melinda finds some things out about the ghost she's trying to help. Sometimes she triggers it deliberately, and sometimes it happens accidentally. It was probably triggered by some strong psionic echo I'd encountered without realizing. As he said, none of us had expected me to experience something like that. Of course, my going to pieces made everyone else assume I was some extreme newbie psychometrist Reuben had brought with him as a specialist. The newbie part was true, but the rest of it we let the others believe because it was more convenient. Though enough of them had put together who I was, I doubted that rumor would last long. And now I was calm again and the existential horror was fading, so I was embarrassed at having a total meltdown, and there were other feelings. I was letting the embarrassment stay at the surface so I didn't have to think about the rest for now. I'm sorry for worrying you. Nothing like this has ever happened before, so I wasn't sure what was going on. So wrapped up in that vision. It felt so real. Well, the level of detail you described earlier does seem noteworthy, at least there at the end of it, which is why I had to talk to a sketch artist now. Because I was an actual witness to a violent crime. Sort of. I didn't witness the attack itself, just the lead up and a bit of the aftermath. When they got enough information out of me to realize I'd seen the suspect's face, it had set off a new flurry of activity. I'm sorry, I should have been more aware of... Now, who's the one over apologizing? I have no idea what you'd think you should have been aware of. We're the ones who messed up. You did have a power surge and presumably a permanent increase in ability. It was utterly irresponsible to bring you here, and I should have refused. I don't think it's reasonable to assume you should have realized this would happen. I'm not sure that's true, but let's leave it at that for now. Winter might throttle us if he comes out here to find we've worked ourselves into some sort of infinite apology loop. Are you going to be okay stopping by the office? Well, I don't imagine I have a choice, and please do not say sorry. He stood and held a hand out to me. I got to my feet slowly in case of dizziness wanted vengeance, but it seemed fine. Winter will be leaving for the office now. Are you good to finish up here? No, she's fine, I think. She was just unnerved and feeling nauseous from the experience. I'll tell her. Yes, that should be fine. Right, we'll touch base later. He disconnected and motioned me to follow him as he started down the corridor. When I fell into step beside him, one of his hands went to my back as if to steady me. Or maybe reassure me. Winter says he's glad you're feeling better. I feel terrible for worrying everyone and disrupting your work. Is Winter going to be okay finishing up by himself? He'll be fine. He doesn't need me here anyway. He's handled more than enough crime scenes to manage alone. More than enough? He doesn't seem much older than me. He can't be if we went to the same primary school. He came to the Esper crime unit about 3 years ago. Have you two been partners since then? Pretty much. That still wasn't that long. I hope he doesn't have to juggle too many questions about me. As I said, Winter will be fine. The story we gave them isn't too much of a stretch anyway, and he's good at deflecting. I feel a little bad that he has to, but if what I saw could be helpful, then maybe it's worth it. Dahlia, it's not your job to help us. That isn't why I brought you here today. You should not have had to endure that. Excuse me. I mean, I get it. I won't say it wasn't distressing, but most of that was because I had no idea what was happening. The rest, well, I was still trying not to think about it. Look, no one else saw this guy's face. I did, and everything else aside, I think that's something to be grateful for. I'm glad you can look at it that way, but still. For now, let's just get you to the office. We can talk about it more later, okay? Of course. I never worked with any sort of sketch artist before, but watching someone sculpt a three-dimensional figure as I described it to them was certainly an experience. By the time I was finished, Winter had arrived. I didn't know where Reuben had got to, but it was Winter who showed me how they put the sketch into a database to try to find matches. We were also running a search with the name I'd heard in that vision, too. And we ended up with 3 possible matches as a sort of digital lineup. It has to be the one in the middle. He has the same 2 moles on his face. Looks like his last name and address is in this dome, Sector 04, right near the victim's place of employment. He did say you got the sense they knew each other. That was just based off a vague jumble of feelings. I got the sense of recognition or something. We'll send someone to find him and find out. I have to admit there's a part of me that questions how easily everyone accepts what I claimed to have seen earlier, given there's no verifiable proof of it. You mean other than the fact we literally found the guy using that information? Gestured to the screen before going back to typing into a manual input device. We found a guy. I mean, I get what you're saying. Something like a vision isn't exactly hard evidence, but psi is a well-understood phenomenon, so of course we take it seriously. We have ways to verify pre- and post-cognitive activity by looking at forward system scans, though it's expensive, and we didn't have any of it prepared for you anyway. In any case, we just used the psychometric experience as a springboard for finding hard evidence. It's not like we're basing a whole case off this. Anyway, I put in a few requests that need to come back, then we'll track this guy down and go talk to him. He's leaned back again, lifting his arms over his head and stretching. Hard to believe you've never had an experience like this one before, given the level of detail you saw, but I guess that's what happens with a queen rank. My rank was never confirmed, you know, and I'm not sure I saw that much detail. Everything was pretty blurry for most of it. Yeah, well, I'll take Endgame's word for it. I made a face at that. You may not like it, but it is what it is. I've never seen someone hit so hard by a theokinetic experience. Wonder if it's your specialty. And if I don't want any psionic specialties? I suppose you may have to get used to the idea. When you learn to direct experiences better, maybe it's not so bad. You say that like you think I'm going to be hanging out at a lot of crime scenes in the future. I'm just saying that once you got over the initial panic of not knowing what was going on, you seem less shaken up than I'd expect. I'm trying not to think about it, is all. I've had other things to worry about since then. Just because I can be calm doesn't mean I wasn't bothered by witnessing an attack that resulted in someone's hospitalization. Even if I didn't see, I looked down, swallowing hard. I hadn't seen the actual crime, but I was certain that was only because Reuben snapped me out of it first. If I'd seen any more than I did, I know I would definitely be shaken up. I'm glad I could help. I can't even begin to sort through the fact that my day went from being a normal day to witnessing a crime. My feelings were a chaotic jumble at this point. Sadness, helplessness, and the whole thing left a bitterness in my mouth I couldn't quite swallow down. I wouldn't be dealing with this at all if I wasn't an Esper, you know? Or if my situation hadn't spiraled out of control because someone else found out that I am one. It makes me angry. And then I think I don't have a right to be angry, and it's complicated. Maybe it's weird to be grateful I could be of help, yet also be frustrated by the exposure to a situation I wouldn't otherwise be dealing with. And there was the guilt, because that felt so selfish to say. Compared to the victim, I had it easy, so why was I even complaining? This happens so many times. Someone thinks they shouldn't be complaining about something because other people have things harder, and it's like, no, you can still be frustrated and angry and upset and complain about a situation that you're in. Just because someone has it worse doesn't mean you can't feel this way about your own situation. It is still your situation. You're allowed to be annoyed or frustrated or upset by it. Listen, I understand it's not what you wanted for your life, but I'll be honest here. I don't know why you're so determined to hate everything to do with Psi. I don't have any at all, so I suppose I'm not an expert. I only enjoyed a few years of having Psi at the planetary standard as a kid before the nanite resistance set in. Oh yeah. Okay, so we have a pseudo Esper and someone who can't even, doesn't even have low level Psi abilities. So I know I don't get the ins and outs of having full blown Psi, but just from a practical standpoint, it seems useful, not just for things like today. I mean, you were studying archaeology, right? Don't you expect having Psi would be useful for locating, I don't know, artifacts, alien booby traps? A tired smile came to my face when he said that. I really want to correct the booby trap misconception, but I'll let it slide for now. Using Psi for that kind of work, though, I have to admit that thought hadn't occurred to me at all. I suppose you may have a point. Hey, look who's back. How are things going over here? Sorry I disappeared like that. We think we may have found him. Put in a search warrant request before we go chase him down and see what he knows. That's great news. I can tell by how thrilled you look. Dahlia, can I speak to you for a moment? Yeah, of course. You really looked unhappy about something. Guess I'll have Tracy go with me since you'll be occupied. This is one where we definitely can't take your protectee with us. Sounds good. Let me know how it goes. Of course. Winter nodded to me and stood, shooting Reuben another curious look before he walked off. Reuben took over Winter's chair, staring at the profile of the man we had identified with a strangely troubled look on his face. Reuben, what's wrong? Something's bothering you. Listen, I just finished talking to Phil about what happened with you. He had some thoughts. Bad thoughts? I don't think it's bad, exactly. Look, first of all, we're going to need to register you as an official Esper consultant, especially now that your experience was used to identify a possible suspect. It's standard procedure to only use registered consultants, so we need to get that taken care of right away. I mean, that's fine. If you were worried I'd be resistant to that, please don't. I understand the need. Even though we have to have your information in our system, we can keep you anonymous when it comes to all public information. We work with many people who would rather not have it publicized they do consultant work. So it shouldn't interfere with your protected status. Alright, so what's bothering you? Right? Phil was wondering if you'd be willing for this to be more than a formality for this specific case, as in would you be willing to consult on some other cases? He thinks that doing so could work in your favor. Work in my favor in what sense? Goes back to what we were talking about earlier today, with Endgame most likely trying to find a way to get you to Core Solaris so you can stay there. It might be harder if you can make a valid argument for contributing out here. Given the discourse lately showing that you're not a danger but an asset could demonstrate how ranked Espers can be beneficial to society if they're allowed to actually take part in it. That's Phil's thinking anyway. You have an Esper consultant already though. We have quick access to a few scattered infantry level espers for consulting, yes. Most of them are low or mid-level. Psychometry, which is a skill we make most use of, is inconsistent even for some bishops, so you can imagine what it's like for infantry. Yeah, I remember mentioning that earlier. The bishops are the ones who have precog and clairvoyance. Yeah, low, mid-level clairvoyance for infantry or unranked espers. Those who don't qualify for rook, knight, or bishop. If we want someone who specializes in it, we have to bring endgame in and pay their high consultant fees, which are higher than most freelancers. On top of that, applying for help is a lengthy process and we can't afford to do it every time, not to mention their tendency to take over cases, which is a separate issue. You two, Paul and Endgame, are on the same side, but you make it seem like a competition. It's not a competition, but half the time when Endgame takes over, we don't even learn the results of the investigation. Can you imagine the lack of closure when the family never learns whether justice is served? I don't want to say we compete, but I can't deny there's some bitterness. And there's been more than one occasion that we've investigated someone and Endgame takes the case over. Then our suspect shows up a few months later in one of those damn black and white uniforms. That happens? Not much, but enough. So not having to rely on Endgame is something we'd prefer, but it's also part of the bigger discussion. If we find this guy right away, it's a pretty powerful statement about the value of having someone of your skill level available to work with us without the red tape. I can see Phil's point. I'm already here anyway, and it's hard to deny I've established the potential. Sounds like putting me under contract is just an additional step since I have to register with you anyway. But look at what happened today. You were distraught after what you saw. I was more shaken by the suddenness and by not being sure what would happen, though. It wasn't that I saw something horrifying. But you could have. When you do this work, you'll see the absolute worst society has to offer. See the best of it too sometimes, but it doesn't always balance out. And you didn't ask to be in this position. I get where Phil is coming from too. It's so difficult to find competent freelance psychometrists. And even then, they don't see full scenes like you did today. But you need to know what you're getting into. Yes, but we're not talking about me doing this as a full-time career forever, just temporarily. I guess that's true too. And the fact that it could help me and others in the long run is appealing. Listen, you don't have to decide today, not about the contract issue. Something like becoming a test case to challenge perceptions and policies isn't a decision you make lightly. What does being an Esper consultant look like? Like, what do they really do? I assume they don't just go to a crime scene and hope they stumble into a vision. Well, not just that. They get background on the case and investigation first, and then they go on location and hope they stumble into a vision. So not that different from today. Knowing what to look for helps them stumble with greater precision. It's not only crime scenes. You would potentially do interrogation observation, even handle some evidence since psionic echoes can linger on items. You would not be chasing suspects down dark alleys if that's what you're thinking. If you're interested in the proposal, I could arrange for you to meet with one of our other consultants to get more information. They may be low level, but they're still experienced. Nope, let's do this. Oof. Okay. I'll do it. Meet the consultant? No, I'll register as a contracted Esper consultant here. Though I'd like to meet an existing consultant too, of course. Wait, you don't have to decide right now, Dahlia. I didn't mean you need to decide today. We have to get you registered today, but the contract. I know that, but we're talking about an opportunity to move from a passive wait-and-see situation to me actively preempting Endgame's potential attempts to relocate me to Core Solaris. I don't like the idea of having to prove the validity of allowing me to exist in society, and I worry a little about that precedent, but let's be real. New Albion's entire system is built on proving one's contribution, so it's actually already a precedent in some places. As much as it would be better to not have to prove my ability to exist without causing problems in order to be given the chance to exist without causing problems, I'm aware that's idealistic. A track record of actual work using my abilities proves I don't need endgame's training while also making it clear that there's value in unaligned Espers at the same time. That has the potential to benefit me and maybe others as well. While Esper consulting isn't my dream job, I'm willing to cling to any available options if it means I can avoid getting dragged to endgame or somewhere else, especially if it's only temporary. I don't need time to think about that. You really are. I smiled and covered one of his hands where it was resting on the desk. I understand you have reservations, but this gives me back some control of my own life, and that's more than I've had since I was first targeted by Endgame and everyone else. The fact that Esper policies for adults are vague gives us an opening to show why they should be strengthened in favor of Espers having freedom to choose how they live. That's all valid, but you still don't have to decide right this minute. Reuben, if I'm being dead honest with you, even if I take a day or two, it won't change anything. There are times I sit down and make lists of pros and cons, and there are times I know right away what I want to do. This is one of the latter situations. Okay, alright. I wasn't expecting this. I thought we'd do the registration and leave the contract for later. For a moment, he looked like he didn't quite know what to do and appeared to be mentally going through checklists or something. Well, not like my tendency for snap decisions hasn't surprised others too, sometimes. Look, let's get your registration done before we leave today. We need that as soon as possible for the current situation. I can go over the full contract with you this evening and we can work on it at home. How's that? That sounds good to me. Alright, we'll work on that then. Reuben was right that the registration was simple, until it became apparent I was missing personal information, of course. With my temporary status in Cerna and my protected person situation, we got stuck on how to handle my address. There were other necessary fields we also weren't sure about. Reuben ended up on a call to get some of it sorted. And I felt weirdly drained by the time we were finished, though maybe it was just the day I'd had. In the morning, Reuben had worried if I was well enough to handle a simple tour. I had done way more than a simple tour by the end of it. I was mentally and physically exhausted by the time we got back to Reuben's place. It felt like the first moment I had to myself when I stepped into the shower, so of course that's when everything came crashing in. Of course. Why is it always the shower? I suppose it was a strangely good place for thinking about heavy things. And I had a lot to think about. So many unexpected things had happened in just a few hours. Too many. I hoped it wasn't a sign of things to come, periods of limbo followed by periods of rapid change. I let out a groan and tipped my head back to let the water course over me. What a chaotic day. I shut off the water and stepped out of the shower, reaching for a towel. Sitting on the toilet seat, I gently wrung the water out of my hair and started to dry it. After that, I quickly dressed and made my way to the living room. Reuben was leaning against the back of the sofa. From the sound of it, he was just ending a call with Winter. He smiled when he saw me. Update from Winter? Yeah, they've made an arrest. Already? Based on my vision? That's right, he's being interrogated now, but it's pretty open and shut. He already confessed. Wow, that was somehow faster than expected. Would they still be looking for him if it wasn't for me? It was a strange feeling. Gladness that I'd been helpful and that they'd apprehended a dangerous person. Sad that they had to. I wondered about the details, the moves and all that. It didn't feel appropriate to ask just to assuage my curiosity. I didn't know if Reuben would answer even if I did. Anyway, we don't have to talk about that right now. I hope you're feeling better. I'm fine, no worries there, just a little tired. It was a long day. Tell me about it. Let's think about takeout for dinner. Oh, so you don't always cook nutritious meals for yourself even if you're at home? Scandalous. If that's the worst scandal I ever have to deal with, I'm doing pretty well. I don't know, unhealthy eating is pretty bad, but I suppose I can forgive it once. I'm glad to know I won't get a public flogging for one meal that isn't home-cooked. Public flogging is a bit intense, even for me. I was just going to mock you relentlessly. Says a person who, by her own admission, had no food in her kitchen the day we met. Guilty as charged. We'll keep your crimes against a healthy diet off the record, I suppose. That's relief. Wouldn't want you to add to my growing criminal record. So, If you are really ready to move forward with the contract, I was thinking we could go over the details while we wait on dinner. Of course, it would be nice to get it completed tonight if possible. Dahlia, today you trailed off, looking away as his expression went serious again. Serious and strangely uncertain. What is it? I was just thinking that your ability to take things in stride and adapt to your situation is pretty admirable. I mean, that's one of her traits, is being flexible. You always pick yourself up and keep going. It takes a lot of strength to do that. There's not much else you can do in the face of extraordinary situations, is there? As much as I love to spend a few hours crying on the floor every time the unexpected happens, you can't always do that, can you? No, but not everyone can adapt as quickly as you did today. Some people take a while to adjust, which is also fine, of course, but the ability to quickly stand back up and move forward is... I admire that trait a lot. I'm not always able to do it, I hope you know. Sometimes I take my time to be upset. A lot of time to be upset. Sometimes I have a tantrum when things don't go my way, the way anyone does. It depends on the situation. I guess I just believe that most people are more capable of adapting than they think they will be. Sometimes you just do what you need to do. I agree with that, but it's still... He looked away again, as if he wasn't sure how to phrase whatever it was he intended to say, and it felt like his face had somehow deepened in color. It's always much easier to be strong when you have people supporting you too, and you've gone above and beyond to be supportive. I hope you realize that's the biggest reason I'm okay right now. I just did what anyone would do. I'm not sure I agree with that, but either way, I'm grateful. Oh, you don't have to be grateful for that. Too bad. You can't stop me. He took his hand gently, the cheeky grin softening a little. You can't stop me from being grateful, so don't even try. He cleared his throat awkwardly and turned away. I thought his ears looked redder than normal. I'll take care of dinner, so just give me a few minutes, and then we'll pull up the contract to look over. So, yeah, his cheeks did get a little more colorful. It's harder to tell with his darker skin tone. Anything in particular you like food-wise? I'll let you decide if you don't mind. I don't know what's nearby or what's good, and I don't think I have the brain power to devote to it. No problem. I'll take care of it. He motioned me to the sofa, and I sat there while he made quick work of ordering dinner. Then he joined me so we could discuss the consultant contract. He was right that it wasn't complicated. We weren't quite finished by the time food arrived, but it was signed and set up in short order afterwards. The road was diverging from what I thought, but it felt like things were moving again. I had yet to decide if that was for good or bad, so I just had to do my best to make sure it was good. Okay. Alright. We are done. I can feel my voice giving out. So that's it for today. So let's... Oops, not profiles, but yeah. That wasn't what I wanted. Galleries. There we go. Let's just admire the CG for a few more moments. Okay. So, thank you everyone for joining me. Should be back next week, and I will remember who actually wrote this next time. I feel so silly for making that mistake earlier, but whatever. So I hope everyone has a good day, and if you celebrate the holiday, happy Easter. If you don't celebrate the holiday, then I hope it was a good one. I've been putting off doing anything on Wednesdays, but we'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. Depends on the situation, all that fun stuff. So yeah, take care everyone, and have fun.